recorded this morning, but didn't get the first few minutes. So we make sure we captured all this afternoon. So we are recording for your information. If you would, during this meeting today, if you would help us with the sound quality, making sure you're muting your microphone. That way we don't pick up some incidental noises like somebody typing away on their keyboard or having a background conversation, whatever. And then you can also unmute as you need. We will have the chat box monitored throughout the meeting today. So if you have questions, please feel free to raise them right there in the chat box at the bottom of the Zoom window. And we'll pay attention to those and call them out as appropriate. Just to introduce myself to those of you who don't know me, I am David Van Horn. I'm the Associate Administrator with Green Hills AEA. I am here today in Mark Draper's absence. He's in some warmer clime somewhere. And also, I will be the Special Ed Director beginning in the fall of this year. I have been a Special Ed Director in the past, and I'm going back to my roots, I guess. Looking forward to it. I will continue to be the Associate Administrator at the same time, so I will have responsibility for all services the agency provides, but a primary focus on special education. So looking forward to that work. And Mark and I are working together this spring as I transition into that. It's amazing how much has not changed. There are a lot of detail changes as I move into that role, but a lot of it is the same principles that I was used to dealing with. Also, we're going to have a new person in the West next year. That new person will be a regional administrator. Since we are not hiring a new special ed director, hiring an individual, we are going to take the opportunity to instead hire a new regional administrator who will provide some support out of our West region. We are currently engaged in accepting applications for that, and we will be interviewing for that in a couple of weeks. So looking forward to that new opportunity. Finally, in terms of the intro part here, there is a link there for 21 Chrome extensions for struggling students. Some of those things are probably things you have seen. I just happen to post it there because I'm a technology geek, nerd, whatever is the appropriate term. And that just came across my radar recently, so I thought I'd share that with everybody. All right. It is my pleasure now to introduce to you Thomas Mays. You've probably heard him speak before. He's with the Iowa Department of Education as legal consultant there. Thomas has agreed to share some topics with us today. Thomas, turn it over to you.
All right. Good afternoon. Thank you for gratifying my need for attention. As you can see, I have a window. It's sunny in Des Moines. It's no longer snowing. It's beautiful out. I will promise not to be distracted by whatever goes on out in this window. I will pay full attention to the Zoom. I was asked to speak about 3 topics. Those 3 topics are fairly broad and fairly timely. I'll do as best as I can to address them in the time allotted. Primarily hitting on the key points and the items where I expect there to be some conversation in future years and at future IEP meetings. I'm not going to go through any of the topics in great detail. This is more an awareness / on the radar presentation rather than an in-depth discussion. So the first topic was 4+ program guidance. There is a link to that guidance document, which was released about a week and a half ago in the agenda for this meeting. In the right-hand column, directly across to the right of my name, Carrie Astrup has her cursor on it right now. So if you want to follow along, the home version of that game is at that link. A couple of key things about this guidance document. This guidance document synthesized a lot of stray memos and emails from person X to person Y about program Z, about student A. And we tried to synthesize all of these key points into one document. A couple of the key points that are in that document is 4+ programs are secondary programs. Although they may be housed on a community college campus, they are secondary education. They are not college scholarships. The purpose of 4+ programs is to provide students with a free, appropriate public education, not to provide them with further post-secondary education. If post-secondary education happens while FAPE is happening, great, but the purpose must be to provide a FAPE, and the child, the young adult, still must be eligible for a FAPE. The standard, since these are secondary programs, is a free, appropriate public education. So it is not a maximization standard. 4+ programs must be individualized to address the learner's needs in living, learning, working, whatever the area of need may be. Key point, they must be individualized. It's not enough for the 4+ program to say all students in our program have a self-advocacy goal. If I don't need a self-advocacy goal, why am I getting one? If I'm at the 4+ program to do something other than self-advocacy, I need a goal in that area. So it's impermissible to shoehorn a student's programming into what the 4+ program wants to provide. The 4+ program must individualize. The 4+ program is also under the supervision of the public school district that is tuitioning the student or the young adult to the 4+ program. So it's not a blank check. It's not a carte blanche to the community college-based program to do whatever they want. Well, we'll just write our goals this way. We'll do things this way because that's who we are here. The program must align with and follow the local district and the AEA's standards, and must align with the local districts and AEA's requirements for IEP development, for progress measurement, for appropriate licensure of staff. All of those requirements and terms and conditions are spelled out in a contract, a sample contract between a community college and a local district. The sample questions about if you have questions about what a contract should contain for a 4+ program, please ensure that you and your fiscal folks and your district colleagues work through that contract with your colleagues at the 4+ programs. One thing that we routinely encountered was sort of impermissible funding considerations. If you are at our program, you need to be reweighted so that you're level 3. Again, like any other program, weighting decisions are not the programs to make, they're the AEAs to make, and they are not, they don't determine programming, they are determined by the specific needs of each specific child. So hopefully this 4+ program guidance will offer some measure of uniformity and a baseline for both content and fiscal folks around the states. If you have any questions about that, either unmute or type in the chat box. Good observation from Angie. This is true for all programs. All secondary programs, secondary special education programs must be individualized. One size fits all, whether it's all or no, never appropriate. The example that Angie used in the chat box, all students in special education in this district have to take Skills 101. Maybe I don't need Skills 101. Maybe my present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, Skills 101 would be of no value to me. Maybe I'm a gen ed student who needs Skills 101. The converse is also true. No child with an IEP can take AP courses because that's just not fair. So again, the analysis applies just as equally to the FAPE analysis, the individualization analysis, progress measurement apply with equal force to 4+ programs as they would to other secondary programs, because 4+ programs are just another variety of or flavor of secondary programs. The graduation date when I complete my 4+, if I'm participating in 4+ programming, my graduation date is when I complete the 4+ program, not when my cohort completes, not when my high school class completes. So if I complete my Carnegie units in May of 17 and I'm going on to 4+ program for a year, my graduation date is May of 18, not May of 17, because once I graduate with a regular diploma, I'm no longer eligible to participate in 4+ programs because my FAPE entitlement has concluded. So switching, there's a natural transition point into changes to graduation requirements. Right now, the status quo in Iowa is a child with a disability can graduate with through one of 3 pathways, through Carnegie units only, the district's graduation requirements, or the district's graduation requirements plus a 4+ program example, some additional living, learning, and working skills necessary for a child to receive a FAPE. And then the third pathway is goals. I graduate with a regular diploma based on my goal completion. The conceptual and legal problem with that is Iowa has amended the graduation requirements for all children to require completion of 4-3-3, 4 units of English, 3 years of math, 3 years of social studies, 3 years of science. And once that became a state level all children requirement, then it became part of the definition of a regular high school diploma. I terminate, my FAPE terminates when I graduate with a regular diploma. So I cannot graduate with a regular diploma if my diploma is conferred solely based on my IEP goals. So we need to start as the state and as a system backing away or walking back from goals-only diplomas to comply both with state law as well as federal special education and federal general education law. ESSA, as recently adopted, defines a regular diploma as meeting standards of the statewide standards that apply to all children. So we're going to need to transition away from or walk back from goals-only diplomas. The department will be providing guidance on that, on how that transition or scaling back looks like this summer. Expect no effect on the class of 2017. Expect no effect on the class of 2018. 2019 is an interim transition year. Pencil in the effective date of this policy redirection for the class of 2020. Again, guidance coming this summer. The guidance will, we're going to work with the Iowa Association of School Boards and School Administrators of Iowa to help put that guidance together in a way that it will be meaningful for districts and boards. The guidance will explain which classes this policy transition applies to. It will also explain how schools and teams can go back through a student's academic record and look for ways in which 4-3-3 might have been met, such as student did a work experience, student did some job shadowing, and through that work experience or through that job shadowing, they completed a half year of social studies. Through economic awareness, they worked on a job, they had some job readiness skills, they learned to manage a till at or manage a cash register and give change and understand sort of the time value of money and the cost of credit, and the importance of keeping good financial records for a small business. Maybe through that's the functional equivalent of the high school's economics class. That student through that job experience might have more economic sense than some of our politicians. So, it would be fair in that instance for the district to consider granting credit or through that work experience or that job shadowing, concluding that student met a portion of the 3 years of social studies. This policy redirection will not eliminate the need for 4+ programs. It doesn't eliminate the need to consider the expanded core for children who are deaf, for children who are have low vision or have physical impairment. It merely states that we're going to look at multiple pathways to meet 4333. And once that guidance is and policy direction is issued this summer, then the grades, diplomas, transcripts document will be revised and reissued to try to keep that document, which is linked in the meeting minutes, try to keep the purpose of that document to documenting and evidencing decisions that are made. Once a decision has been made, how do you record it in the child's report card, on the transcript? How do you note that on their diploma versus when have they earned a diploma? When a child has earned a diploma is a different question to what should the transcript say about how the child earned the diploma. So that document will be revised this summer and have a little bit more targeted purpose. The targeted purpose being how to document some sound decisions that have already been made rather than how to make those decisions. How to make those decisions really should live more in guidance and procedures and policies rather than a guidance document. So, final topic. From Julie Jensen to everyone, the IEP team is to look through a student's transcript and help clarify the completion of 4333. Again, I think that's something that the guidance might direct an IEP team to consider. For some children, completion of 4333 will be more obvious than others. So I think, don't want to get ahead of what the guidance will say, but I think in answer to Julie's observation in the chat box, that's something that the IEP team might be directed by guidance to do, to look through the students' IEP progress measurement, look through their present levels, look through the activities that they've completed towards goals, and determine whether or not some of that academic work is able to be captured and applied towards 4333. So again, I think that Julie, that's a possible option. I'm going to defer to whether or not the guidance document, to whether or not that actually is a requirement versus a suggestion, but I think it's something to look forward as an option to the team. So graduation with a regular diploma terminates my entitlement to a FAPE. The Supreme Court has decided that they are going to take up the question of what is a free appropriate public education. In the current legal topics link in my portion of the presentation, the link immediately to the left of my name should link out to a separate document that has links to the oral argument that the Supreme Court heard, as well as the Federal Appeals Court decision they're reviewing. The case was argued about a month ago. And the question before the Supreme Court is whether, how much minimum standards of good enoughness is required in order to receive a free appropriate public education. Is it some benefit or meaningful benefit? And if it's meaningful benefit, is that a different standard than some? So that's the question before the U.S. Supreme Court. Currently, there are 8 justices on the Supreme Court. If the 8 justices tie 4-4, it's as if the case never happened. The only way law will be made in this case, one way or another, is if there are 5 votes. 5 votes to affirm, meaning that the lower court, which said the FAPE standard is some benefit, is the correct standard, and if so, that's the status quo in Iowa. It would take 5 votes in the other direction to change the law, to state that, or to add to Rowley and say it's not enough to have some benefit, that some benefit must be meaningful. Right now, as I stated earlier, Iowa is one of the jurisdictions that requires some benefit. 2 other circuits, the 3rd Circuit, which is Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware, and the 6th Circuit, which is Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, and I believe West Virginia. Those circuits require a meaningful standard of benefit. So the Supreme Court will decide which of these competing interpretations is right. If they stick with some, it's status quo for Iowa. If the standard is changed to meaningful, it's going to be sort of frothy and chaotic for a couple of years. Some folks will assume that meaningful is the maximization of potential standard in disguise, like it's the maximization standard is coming in under a cloak of invisibility, and then at the IEP meeting, the cloak of invisibility comes off, and whoa, you must maximize my child's potential. There's going to be, and there should be, if parents' council are doing their job, an argument that a meaningful standard implies something noticeably higher than some. The question is whether or not that is sustainable in the long term. One of the justices described the statute in particular and the oral argument in general as a blizzard of words. Free, appropriate public education, least restrictive environment, pleasant levels of academic achievement and functional performance. What does this all mean, especially when they intersect with each other? So I think the fact that this is a statute that one justice described as a blizzard of words sort of compounds the difficulty of determining if there's a difference between some and meaningful. How much more than some is meaningful? Is it a little bit more or a lot more? Will it make a functional difference? Should teams, when they're writing IEPs, worry about what happens in litigation, and will it pass the some versus meaningful test? Or should teams be worried and focus more on making sound educational decisions based on peer-reviewed research and based on the child's present levels and the child's evaluation data and progress measurement data? I don't know if the court reverses and establishes a meaningful benefit standard. I don't know how much that will alter the pattern of outcomes. Currently parents prevail on about 3 out of 10 special education cases that go to court. Schools prevail on about 6 to 10, and 1 out of 10 is sort of a split. The baby is split. A partial verdict in favor of the school and a partial verdict in favor of the family. I don't know if altering the standard and making it meaningful will change outcomes. With that, I'll offer a prediction. I predict with a very slight degree of confidence that the most likely outcome is a reversal. Based on the pattern of oral arguments, I think that the Supreme Court, if they're going to make a decision at all, leans ever so slightly in favor of raising the standard and making it a meaningful standard. The second most likely outcome is a 4-4 tie. And again, if it's a 4-4 tie, Control-Alt-Delete, it's as if the case never happened. It doesn't set precedent, and the issue will live to be raised at another day in front of a 9-person court. For the appellate law geeks in the room, if Judge Gorsuch is confirmed and takes his seat as Justice Gorsuch, he will not be able to be the 9th vote because he is being elevated from the court that Andrew F. was decided by. So the custom when a seated federal appeals judge is promoted to the Supreme Court, they don't participate in any of the cases that were coming from the court during a lower court during the time they were on that lower court. So Judge Gorsuch, if he becomes Justice Gorsuch, will not be the tie-breaking vote in this case. It will remain in an 8-person court if he is confirmed, which I think he should be. Even though I disagree with his politics, he's eminently qualified to be on our court, our Supreme Court. So questions either unmute or in the chat box. It's going to be exciting. There's links to the oral argument. You'll be very I think you will hear, if you listen to the oral argument, the exasperation in the justice's voice about how unclear special education is and how unclear, there's no black and white. There's no bright lines, and judges love bright lines, but they are very hesitant to try to find them when they don't exist. So any further questions, I'll turn it back over to David, and I'll stick around for a while in case there's any that pop up in the chat box. But thank you for gratifying my need for attention and giving me some time on your very busy agenda.
Thomas, anytime you have a need for attention, just give us a call. We're more than willing to have you on. Thank you so much. Any other questions for Thomas? All right. Thanks again. Okay. So it looks like our next agenda item is more legal updates, this time from Ron Russell.
Hey, I went ahead and shared my screen just for a few minutes here. Appreciate Thomas bringing us up to date on some kind of new and up and coming kinds of issues. I just briefly wanted to share some information that's not really new, but it's something we don't necessarily talk a lot about, and it's an issue of considering student access to extracurricular activities in the IEP. And I'm actually going to just briefly share with you some ideas about how to consider that, and a few example cases where there was disagreement about this issue. It was actually presented at the Tri-State Law Conference this fall. We wanted to share a little bit of that with you. And over on the right of the notes page here, most of you are familiar with the Dear Colleague letters that are out there that give guidance on some of these kinds of issues. This is not a new one. It was actually shared in 2013, but it's there for your reference. It digs a lot deeper into this topic, and there's a few links there with some fast facts on that letter, or if you'd like to see the full letter as well. But I'm going to quickly go to just some notes that I wanted to kind of walk us through here. And what you're seeing on the screen here, when you think of IDEA, this slide that I'm showing you here, and this was a lawyer named David Hodgkins, a Texas lawyer, actually did a nice job of talking about these issues. And if you look at this slide up here, it's just a reminder to us that IDEA specifically, along with special education related services and supplementary aids, it specifically mentions that our kids need to have access to it, and they need to be able to participate in extracurriculars and non-academic activities. So, as you all know, we do address this on each and every IEP. This one little question appears on page G on the Iowa IEP. Will this individual participate in non-academic activities with non-disabled peers and have the same opportunity to participate in extracurricular activities as non-disabled peers? And we just simply have to do a yes or no on the IEP. There's not a place for a whole lot of discussion or narrative. It's just a yes or no. So we technically address this at every IEP, but wanted to talk about some of the considerations that may need to come up at times when working with with families. This was helpful to me, this little set of bullet points here that was shared at the conference. We know that students should have equal opportunity to participate, but here are some bullets of what that does not mean. You know, for a student with a disability that wants to participate in a sport or activity, it does not mean changing the essential elements or the nature of the game, if we're talking about a sport. Does not mean giving the student an unfair advantage over other competitors. Changing the nature of selective teams. Students with disabilities have to compete with everyone else and legitimately earn their place in the team. And also does not mean compromising student safety. So just wanted to talk about a few cases that were shared that might kind of help you just think through considerations if you run into situations where there's maybe a question mark about how a student with a disability could or should be participating. This was an interesting one that was shared. It was regarding marching band. A student with autism was part of the band, and that student was removed due to behavioral issues, apparently, that were happening during band activities. Well, in this case, a hearing officer found that the school did violate IDEA by removing that student from band. And in this case, it was the thought that the district failed to provide required counseling in his IEP. So in other words, the decision was, or the feeling was in the court, that the school could have provided necessary services to help that student work through behavior issues so that they could participate. So that was a case where it was found that the school did not, provide necessary services to help that student participate. What about some other examples? A basketball case example. Picture that we have a student with a hearing impairment who wants to try out for the basketball team. This is a good example of thinking about what's reasonable accommodations. Should the sign language interpreter be provided at tryouts? Yes. If that student makes a team, should the interpreter be provided at practices and games? Yes. So those would be things that would help that student participate. If you think about those bullets we talked about, doesn't change the nature of the game. There's no other negative impact on the process, but it's accommodations in place that let that student participate. Track. Again, if we think of a hearing impaired student, could you provide visual cues to start the race? This would be a reasonable accommodation. Doesn't change the nature of the game. Wouldn't give the student an advantage. So that would be a relatively simple kind of a thing to help that student participate. But sometimes these kinds of things come up, and there can be disagreements between schools and families. Sometimes health-related disabilities that, and here's one that's actually falling under Section 504, a gymnastics club example. The case was shared about a diabetic student, and so after this gymnastics club, the parent had requested that glucose testing and insulin administration happen after school. So, after regular school hours for this club. So this wasn't an issue of making the team. I believe this was just anybody could be a part of the club. But must the school provide that? And the answer would be yes. That would be, in this case, necessary to allow that student to access the activity. We're not altering the sport in any way. So that would be viewed as a reasonable accommodation. And so in a case like this, had the school, said we won't do that, we won't provide that testing and administration of the medication, that would have been considered discriminatory. Just raising the question about a student with a disability, are they guaranteed a spot on the team? The short answer is no. In a case example given, There was a student that for some reason was unable to wear hearing aids during basketball. We had a case where a coach used hand signals, lip reading, dry erase boards, tried a variety of things, to help that student with cueing and to get them the feedback that they needed during the tryout period. But in this case, after a 3-day tryout, the student was cut from the team on the basis of didn't have the basketball skills. So that student was required to compete with others, but it could be viewed as non-discriminatory because the coach did certainly take into considerations doing the kinds of accommodations that would help that student to fairly try out. And the last one, that you can ponder as a high school cheerleading case. This was a actual case where a student failed to make the team, the cheerleading squad, and the parent claim was that you don't want to deal with my daughter's health issue. In this case, it was diabetes again. However, as this case was analyzed, it was found out that this student did try out and actually had lower scores in skill areas. So it was a performance-based issue, and so it was found that the school was not unreasonable. So that was, so she was able to be cut from the team and not make the team. On the other hand, if in this cheerleader case, if we had a student who needed to take breaks or otherwise address needs associated with that health condition and the school refused that could be a very different situation, and it could be viewed as discriminatory. So kind of in sum, like a lot of things, it boils down to reasonableness. Is the school allowing reasonable accommodations to let each and every student access and try out and participate in non-academic activities with appropriate accommodations? Not a guarantee of making a team, but access is kind of the key. I can stop talking for a minute, and I don't know if anybody has any thoughts they want to share or questions. This is really just intended to maybe help you keep this this concept just on the forefront as it may come up, or but maybe some of you have had cases where this has been a question mark. So we can open it up to any questions or things that may come up in the chat box. Sounds pretty quiet out there.
Thank you, Ron. Any questions for Ron? Okay. Hearing none. Carrie, looks like you're up.
Yeah, terrific. All right. We're going to jump off the legal slide and just play on an information playground for a little bit. I just wanted to remind everyone that the state is looking at thousands of transition IEPs this year. That work is underway. In our agency, we'll be looking at over 600, and that work will start with our transition team in April. That transition team includes Nancy Lindgren, Samantha Wilson, Mary McLaren, Amy Lydell, and Rebecca Hamilton, as well as myself. We may have a few other special education representatives joining us. And all of that information will get turned into the state. The state will take a look at that data and then determine how they will provide technical assistance. My understanding is that it'll likely look like a universal. If your data is good and you don't need many supports, then you can kind of continue as is. If you need a little bit of support, that'll be arranged. And then if you need intensive support, that will also be supplied. We'll know more about that hopefully in August or before. Then the other information that I wanted to share with you is that it's been a discussion with our special education representatives in our schools that voc rehab looks different in different schools across our agency. When I say it looks different, meaning some schools say, oh, I get that service, and other schools say, well, I didn't know that they could do that service. And so what we have begun is a conversation with vocational rehabilitation to find out for sure what their standard operating procedures are as far as providing services to schools. And then we want to make sure that all of our school districts know what to expect from vocational rehab and how we can access it and make sure that this is producing outcomes for our students. Transition is, well, let me say it this way. Voc Rehab is a very strong key player in transition services. And that's been determined by the Department of Education. And so in that scenario, then we need to make sure as schools and as an AEA that we're accessing all of the supports that VR can provide. So finding out what all those supports are and making sure everyone knows how to access them to work for their students. That's kind of the goal of this conversation. It should take place in the next week or two. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll have some more information about Voc Rehab. I will entertain questions if anyone has any. Crickets.
There are a lot of crickets today. All right. Thank you, Carrie. Angie, you're on.
All right, thank you. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about transition from C to B, and a couple of different things. One, about a state task team that has been developed to look at the transition from C to B, and two, to talk about our own agency, kind of some newly developed procedures that help with the smooth transition from C to B for families and children. So in terms of this task force from C to B, which from our AEA includes myself, Maureen Lonsdale, who is our early access regional liaison, and I'm blanking on the third name, Karen Spahn, who is a 3 to 5 consultant for the agency. The purpose of this task team is really to look at resources and tools to assist IEP teams and IFSP teams in their collaboration, and looking at the types of data that can support the transition from C to B in terms of that entitlement piece. Right now across the state, it looks different. It looks different from AEA to AEA. The data sets that teams are looking at look different from A to A and even from district to district in many cases. So their purpose is to develop kind of a guiding practice with resources and materials that will allow all districts and AEAs across the state to function relatively uniformly with regards to that. Some of the guiding principles of that work, again, is that continuity of services and supports from early access during that transition from C to B. That can be trying time for families as the systems are so different. Early access is really family focused. It looks at supporting the family on being the child's best teacher, and then our part B is really focused on the student. We want to be able to use data from early access to make important contributions to the Part B entitlement and the eligibility decisions, as well as need decisions. What can we take from early access that will help us design an effective IEP for a child? We want to make sure that those early access providers and special education evaluators are working together to make sure all sources of data are being utilized, and we're looking at the RIOT, review, interview, observe, and test. And we want to make sure right now that, or going forward, that our eligibility decisions are based on the most sound data that we have available to us, that it's comprehensive data, valid, reliable, and objective. And that could be a struggle for a number of reasons. Again, early access is quite different. You can qualify for early access by not having a delay, but by having a condition that might lead to a delay. And so the types of data that you collect certainly would be a little bit different. And we also have children that enter into early access at a very late age. to your 6 months to your 7 months, and early access doesn't have the opportunity to collect the richness of data that they would had the child been in the system for 2 going on 3 years. So to try to make that eligibility decision for the child, which is a real high stakes decision, the most valid and reliable and objective as we can. As a part of that task team, each person has been assigned to a work group. And the homework assignment for each group is to take a specific part of the IEP. In IEP world, we call them like Form B and the goal page, and Form F, the services page, and so forth. In IEP land, we call them tabs. So each IFSP tab will be looked at by a different team. And we will look at that and try to answer those 2 questions that you see there. How does the data that's available in this IFSP tab help us in addressing this eligibility requirement? And then what limitations exist in the data from this tab? So I applaud the state for pulling together this task team to look at this, because I know we've struggled with it as an agency, and I know other AEAs and districts do as well. So what I ask from you is to assist us in creating the best possible process and resource. If you have suggestions, if you have information that you see would be really that is either lacking or very helpful in helping to make that eligibility decision, send me a message. Again, my name's Angie Hance. I'm in the Creston AEA office. But send me a message, let me know what you're thinking. And I'd be happy to take that to the next task team meeting that we have in March. Are there any questions about that team and the work of that team? Short wait time. I ran over this morning, so moving on. Green Hills AEA. There was a group that got together over a year ago of various people within our agency to look at this idea of transition from C to B. As I said earlier, Part C is really a family-centered process. You qualify for Part C services in a completely different way than you would for special education. And because those 2 systems don't work, they look so different, it's very important to have collaboration on both sides of the table when coming together to make eligibility decisions. And what we found in the past is that Part C has been relied on pretty heavily in making some of those Part B decisions. They've been responsible for evaluations. They've been responsible for the suspect for disability in EER, and even in some cases supporting writing the IEP. So what we have recommended for current practice, and hopefully our staff have been out talking with you guys in the districts about the process and the procedural guidance, is we hope that there's increased collaboration between the 2 systems, and that Part B staff, AEA Part B staff and LEA Part B staff, have a greater, more active role in facilitating that Part B process. So there is a guidance document in the agenda as well as a PowerPoint, and those will help you, if you haven't seen those already, begin to understand some of the requirements in our Part C land. In Part B, it's a little more clear-cut when you suspect a disability. In Part C land, Part C people are charged with not necessarily suspicion of disability to start with in the formal sense, but they have to, once a child is transition age, determine which formal transition pathway a child will go down, whether it's potentially eligible for Part B or not potentially eligible for Part B. So if we're going down that pathway of potentially eligible for Part B, that really is a trigger for the suspect for disability process. And so that's kind of going to start with Part C and all the data that they have available to them to say, we want to go down this potentially eligible for Part B process. And then that triggers the suspect for disability process, which is where we begin to pull in our Part B colleagues. So again, you have all those resources available. Again, hopefully our Part C and or Part B teams have come and met with districts and talked about it. We don't want to dictate the exact process and procedures that every district takes. We want to make it flexible within the guidelines that we've set forth. But if you have questions about this C2B transition process, please don't hesitate to contact one of your regional administrators. They can certainly help with a problem-solving conversation, help get you more information, help you understand the process or the legal requirements that Part C has to take relative to this suspicion, if you will. And it just seems to make sense that Part B staff who know Part B processes so much better be the ones that are more involved in supporting those decisions for entitlement. So with that, unless there are any questions, we can move on to the next topic. Any questions from anyone? All right.
Okay, Ron.
Thank you.
Thanks, Angie.
Okay. Our next topic here is really just a brief reminder of the need for IEP teams to be making sure that they have considered the issue of extended school year services, the ESYS. Over on your agenda here, you have several links. The second link in the right-hand column is just the section of our state procedural manual that reminds you of the requirements of considering extended year services. It does recommend that at least by 60 days prior to where services might begin in the spring, that they be considered. And I'm going to just jump in and take you to this other document, or this link rather, summary. And this is actually coming from the Department of Education website. It's a section of the website that has kind of some brief, concise guidance on certain special education topics that go along with the IEP. And I found this to be a helpful section to use to think about extended school year services. And so just a quick review. There really are, well, I mean, by definition, there are special education services that are provided to a child with a disability beyond the normal school year, of course, at no cost to parent or child. And ultimately, these are cases where the IEP team decides that in order for a child to have FAPE, they must have some continuity of services throughout the summer. If you look here on how do we decide, you can see there are primarily three standards or checks that a team might use in deciding whether extended year is necessary for a student. First one, is there a goal area of concern that might require summer programming? The regression-based standard, and that's the issue of is there data or evidence to suggest that if services don't continue in some way during the summer, that there would be significant regression that would take an unusual amount of time for that student to recoup. And then there's rare and unusual circumstances. And as you scroll down here, you get a little bit more detail on these areas that will really help your IEP teams to think through whether or not this summer service may be needed. Let's take a look at a few of those there. And the regression standard, this is not regulatory, but kind of you get a little bit of a guidance here. Notice this fourth bullet, it says for any IEP team using a 9-week recruitment period, it must be interpreted flexibly in light of the child's needs. So this recruitment period, I mean, if you're looking at past data, it's an issue of, you know, how long might it take that student to recoup skills, and is that reasonable compared to what may happen with our general ed peers? Under the rare and unusual circumstances, there's a couple things we can look at here that, you know, in a small number of cases, you may find kids that are in critical stage of development, or maybe there's a window of opportunity that could be lost if we had interruption of services. One example that could be one of many would be, we can imagine a preschool student with a disability, and perhaps in in March or April, they start using words. The team may make a decision that that's a critical stage. We have a window of opportunity. We wouldn't want to completely stop services for the summer because of that skill just appearing. You know, other things too. Is there a certain methodology or treatment that's going on with a student where a year-round model is an integral part of that? Okay. So just suggesting this link might be helpful to your IEP teams as they talk through some of these issues. Do be careful to make sure that your IEP teams are looking at this each and every year. I think sometimes it's tempting for teachers just to kind of assume that this is not going to be a need, and they check no on the IEP and move on. But you at least want to explain the topic, bring that up to parents as you go through the IEP process, knowing that getting extended year is going to be a very small number of students with kind of these unique circumstances. Down here at the bottom, the last thing I wanted to point you to is there are some critical questions that cover really all three of the standards there in different ways. So the suggestion here is if an IEP team answers yes to any of these questions, then extended year should be given serious consideration. So if you have a team that's struggling with, is a need there, is it not, it might be a good exercise to kind of brainstorm through some of these questions to see if they would apply to that student. So, all right, I will stop talking. What questions do you have? Anybody have any thoughts or questions about extended year? I'm not seeing anything in the chat room here.
Things are pretty quiet. All right. Thank you, Ron. Again, if there are any questions that come up that you think about as we move forward, go ahead and put them in the chat window there, and Ron will respond to them near the end of the meeting. All right. It's my pleasure to introduce Julie Jensen. Julie.
All right. Thanks, David. And again, it's my pleasure to be part of these meetings out at Green Hill and support special ed leadership everywhere. I'll let you know that there's 2 other AEAs that are doing meetings very similar to this afternoon. So it's a great way to use Zoom in and out. Okay, just a couple of updates. I didn't want to repeat things from Thomas, so he and I met earlier this week just to make sure we weren't going to be saying anything similar. I'll just reinforce a couple of things from his information. That 4+ programming, Kim Drew is the transition consultant, and she is actually doing a Zoom meeting this afternoon. It's also being recorded and will be on the website too, so if there's some clarifications there. I don't know if Thomas mentioned it this afternoon, but I know he did this morning. This was really the first effort where our special ed finance team, led by Bill Roeder and Tom Cooley, worked with Barb Guy and Kim Drew together, so that what Barb has shared is that we want to make sure programming information and finance information are all coming together for one message from the department. And so they really worked hard on getting that out together. Secondly, on the diploma and graduation requirements, and Thomas did mention it this afternoon, we'll really be working closely with SAI and IASB on that. So if there are some local LEA board policies that need to be changed, they'll be working on getting that information out with us as well. So for anyone out there that's thinking, oh my goodness, our graduation requirements on the board need to change a little bit, you'll have time for that as we roll that out. Third information is about that new IEP system. And if you've had a chance this fall to hear Barb Guy talk at all, and know that there were challenges with tier and fast and the assessment windows and the programming piece with that. We learned on Monday that the winter window, which I think either closes today or this week, that it has been substantially improved as far as working well for across the state. So with that information, and when Barb talks about she had her fingers and toes crossed and anything else that could cross to make sure we could still implement a new IEP, we have the yellow to almost green light for July of 2018. So we're going to move forward planning on that, and we'll be working with AEAs on getting that information and training as we go on for that IEP program to be attached with tier and fast. So one program where you can find all information out about a student, which down the road will be great. And then finally, the last piece of information I have is currently working with a website designer for supporting special ed leadership and getting all of the legal information in one place. So we can get our Iowa Administrative Code, we can get letters from Dear Colleague letters, we can get information from the Federal Office of Special Education, all in one place. So that, let's say as a principal or a superintendent out there, I want to make sure I'm following all the guidelines for specialized transportation. I can put that search in there, and it'll show me the code, it'll show me all information that pertains to specialized transportation in one place. Some of you, if you have challenges with the department's website, like I have challenges finding out all that information, there's some on state guidance, there's some on specific topics. So we're hoping that will help all of us have it in one place. That is projected to get up and running by July. I'm going to be seeking some volunteers this spring, meaning April or May, to look at it, tweak with it, play with it, make sure that it's friendly for everybody out in the field. So those were kind of my 4 bullets of updates, and I think there's any questions. Looks like Ron is answering questions out there. So anything else? All right, thank you, David.
All right, thank you so much. All right. The next item I'll be brief. It's about the role of the messenger, or those of you who are attending these meetings. First of all, again, we appreciate you attending these meetings. We know you're busy and you could spend your time doing many other things. We appreciate you being here. What we would ask is that since you are here, we'd ask that you be a point of contact for your respective district, your schools, the group that you might represent here. We'd ask that you'd be a conduit of information from these meetings back to those groups, those schools, whatever it might be. And the special ed reps who are here and the special ed reps you work with, please use them as collaborators on communicating back to the district, back to others. We want to use this as a forum to get as much information out to as many people as we possibly can. And one of those things that we will do too is, like I said at the beginning, this is being recorded and it will be up on YouTube just as quickly as we can get it there. And so we'll send that link out to you. And so as you communicate back with others, you'll have that as a tool for communicating. And just the last piece of this is, how can we help you with communicating things back? Doing things like making the YouTube of this, the video of this available through YouTube. What are some other things we might be able to do to help you out as you communicate with others? You know, the one thing that comes to mind is, I think I'll allow with my administrative team here for a second, is we do have the At a Glance. I don't know if we've put a link to the video in At a Glance before, but I think if we could do that in the next week or two, that'd be a way of pushing it out to even more people. Julie, we do have a question for you. Angie and I were doing a back channel conversation. what other AEAs or have a format like this, we'd like to talk with them, and maybe we can learn from each other.
You bet, David. I can tell you that
Uh-oh, Julie froze up.
Keystone has a format. So you say, oh, am I here there?
You're back now. I heard Keystone.
Okay, sorry about that. So Keystone has a format like this. Mississippi Bend has just started.
Okay.
And so they are actually meeting in person. Heartland has a group, they meet quarterly. Grant Wood has a group, they meet quarterly. AEA 267 has just started this year. And I always get them mixed up. Great Prairie has, I have to go.
Yeah, sure, I can see, yeah.
Yeah. And so Angelisa has started, and hers is also on a Zoom format. So there's lots of different avenues that the AEAs have been doing.
Okay.
Northwest has also, I have not participated in theirs, but I believe they have a group going too.
Okay, great. So maybe just a conversation at the special ed directors meeting. Okay. All right. Thank you, Julie.
You bet.
All right, Angie, you're back up again.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen, and I will be briefer than I was this morning. This is something that we've talked with you about before, but we wanted to make you aware again of some work that we're doing with the special education representatives on roles and responsibilities. Historically, we've had a group that met. We reviewed an extensive list of the different activities that we do on a daily or weekly or monthly kind of basis. And we classified each of those activities and duties and created kind of a format to identify whether this is something that falls within the realm of special education or something that falls kind of outside of that realm and really should be given to somebody else to do. So the reason why we did that is, one, because it's taking away time from the activities and supports that we can provide within special education. And two, onto the next slide, we wanted to make sure that we were using our special ed funds and staff in a legally defensible way. And we had a number of instances of things that we were doing that probably didn't fall in that legally defensible category. And so you've seen this picture before, and I know you can't read it on there, but you know, it really talks about those things in the middle that are paid with special ed funds, those activities done through special ed funds that are perfectly appropriate to do. Then there's another layer of activities that should be occasional and incidental, occasional support, occasional consultation, some professional development to support IEP needs, different things like that. And then on the outside circle in the red are things that are not allowable, as you can see in the key down in the bottom left side. Things like primary resource for general education initiatives, general education instruction, hiring general education staff. So we just wanted to make sure that we're falling within that occasional and incidental and the inner part of that circle of things that we know that we should and could be doing. What we did is, after we took a look at all of those activities, we tried to break them into 4 categories, from a level A to where this is something that it's really a requirement that we do. We hold special training in. LEAs are not expected really to do those things, and so we need to make sure our staff are highly trained in those. The level B activities are things that we're trained in. They're needed by the AEA. They're usually led or intentionally supported by our SPED reps. Even though the LEA may have a capacity to lead them internally, we're going to be involved in those kinds of things. A level C activity is something that, well, we may or may not hold special training in, but really it needs to be led by the LEA. So we're going to try to work either through the special ed rep or other AEA staff to build capacity in the LEA to carry on that work. So that would be kind of short-term support with the intent to turn that over and only be occasional incidental in that work. And then our level D activities that we identified were things that we really should not be participating in. And our response to a district who might ask us to do that would be, we need to redirect that to someone else that's more appropriate. After we kind of classified those levels of support, A, B, C, and D, we also categorized them as either falling into kind of what we call universal, targeted, post-consent, and entitled. There are a number of activities that we do across all of these things, but they really need to be targeted towards special education needs. An example would be in the next slide, which again, you have this slide in your agenda. At the universal tier 1 level, one of the things that came up that we're sometimes asked to do is to collect, organize, and analyze universal screening data. While we feel like our SPED reps should know how to access, organize, and interpret that data, it would primarily be for child find and or reevaluation kinds of activities. We've been called in to a stat team when we feel like we're moving on to a suspect for disability, or we just can't figure something out and we need some assistance to that suspect for disability EER and reevaluation process. In that same area under universal, an example would be child fair activities and kindergarten roundups. And you can see that we classified that as a level D. And an example that was given was to participate in a day or maybe more than that of a child fair and sit at a table at the end and hand parents, some nice information. Well, that doesn't really support the needs of our most neediest learners, our students with IEPs, so that would not be something that we would want our special ed reps to be involved in. So we classified that as a level D, and that's something that we're going to work to give away to find someone within your district that's more appropriate from a fiscal standpoint to take care of that. You can also see in that notes column that it says see SER Child Find Guidance Document. And I hope this works. I'm going to, I'm not going to pull that one up. I've got another one I'll pull up. But in many of the cases, we tried to put together a guidance document that we could share with districts and staff that would say, this is kind of what this means. This is why we would do what we would do, and here's some examples of what is an acceptable practice, and here's an acceptable of something that's not an acceptable practice. So real quick, hopefully you can see this. This is a stat team guidance. And so it talks about what is a student assistance team. It gives us some reference to the Iowa Administrative Rules of Special Education in terms of what are general education interventions. And then from a document, the use of special ed funds, question and answer, can AA special ed reps support, I don't know why it says section stat, but I can fix that. So can an SER be involved in the stat team process? And so you can see in the parentheses, it's a question of purpose and intent, not the name of the activity. If participation is part of child find, it's part of gathering information to determine eligibility. So attending stat meetings solely for the purpose of attendance would not be, an appropriate activity for us. So then most of these child find or these guidance documents have a short little section about permissible participation and non-examples. So in your handout, you have links to all of these, the ones that have been created to date, and we're working on a couple of others. But in your agenda, you have access to these 5 or 6 guidance documents that we've created. I would ask that if you have any questions about these guidance documents, or if you have a concern about a staff member saying, I really can't engage in that anymore, to please contact your regional administrator to help you problem solve through the issue and to try to figure out a way for your needs to be met, but potentially without a special education representative being involved in that. So I'm going to stop sharing now. Ask if there are any questions. I know we only have about 12 minutes left, so I'm trying to be brief.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Angie.
All right, I'll just move right on to open enrollment. All right, here it goes again. So open enrollment, this is a very timely discussion as open enrollment requests are due March 1st. And once you get those, you're going to have to begin the process of reviewing those requests, particularly with students who have IEPs, to determine if your district can appropriately serve that child. So this discussion today comes from a procedures manual change that we shared with you back in September when we had our first meeting of the year. What was added to the manual was this idea of the AEA being invited to the conversation. So the determination of whether the resident district can provide FAPE to a student who's wanting to open enroll needs to include appropriate AEA personnel before the application can be approved. And specifically, again, in the manual, it talks about the AEA Director of Special Education will designate the AEA professional to participate in that consultation process. For now, Mark has designated the regional administrators of the AEA to be those go-to people. That may change in the future, but for now, it had kind of fallen off of our radar, I think, until now, when we know that these conversations are going to be held in the next few months. And since Mark decided to take a nice little vacation, for right now, it will be the AEA. And what that means is if you're having conversations with regards to open enrollment requests for students who have IEPs, you must invite the AEA regional administrator. In working with the Iowa Connections Academy, who's been doing this for quite a while, they've kind of developed this really nice process. So we begged, borrowed, and stole from kind of some of the work that they've done. And we've created a recommended practice, which you'll find a link to in your agenda. So the first thing, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but some key points is when your district receives a copy of an open enrollment request, always, 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 always check to see if the student has an IEP. In some cases, a parent, for whatever reason, will not check that the student has an IEP, and you could get yourself into trouble if you're not checking to find that out before you approve their open enrollment. Another recommended practice is that the receiving LEA sets up a conference call, which would include the AA regional administrator. And if it's kind of a tricky case involving the AEA special education representative, who probably knows the district programs pretty well, and the resident district, we would recommend you invite the principal, but they could assign that representation to someone else. To send a Google invite, and we have provided an example of what might be the text of that invite. And please note that parents are not invited to this call. It's just the resident and sending AEA and the resident AEA. And it's a very brief 20 to 30 minute conversation. And at the end of that conversation, you should be able to determine whether or not the receiving district would be able to provide FAPE. You can, in case you didn't know this, in the context of a Google Calendar invite, you can upload PDFs. So you could certainly send a copy of the IEP and the open enrollment request within the context of that Google Calendar invite. You'd make the call. Someone, it could be the AEA regional administrator or other designee, kind of set the stage for the call. And again, we've provided an example. Something along the lines of, thank you for being here. This is not an IEP meeting. We're just reviewing the IEP to see if it looks like the receiving district can provide the student the services that are in the IEP. So you'll be reviewing a variety of forms, kind of going through the Form B, the goals, the services, et cetera, to make that decision. After you kind of go through that, you'll ask for feedback, comments from all parties, and then the team should be able to make that decision. If the decision is the district cannot provide FAPE, a prior written notice and a procedural safeguards is required to be sent to the parent. And we also recommend you send a copy of the prior written notice to the resident district, which it'd be on the web IEP system, but make sure they're aware of that. And the superintendent would also send a letter to the resident district describing the decision. And we have examples of both of that in that guidance document. Note that even though your little team may say, yeah, we think we can provide FAPE to the student, if there's no room in the inn, if there's insufficient space, the superintendent can still deny the child open enrollment based on that. Some cautions and think about. The primary one is we want to make sure that nobody's unilaterally denying open enrollment requests. All students with disabilities we won't accept. All students with behavioral disabilities we won't accept. So we want to be careful that we're not doing that. And your open enrollment requests, as you all know, probably are due March 1st unless there's a good cause exemption or unless they're a kindergartner. Again, I have a copy of the guidance document, and feel free to use those or modify those as works in your district. And I've also enclosed a link to the open enrollment handbook so you can have access to that. We just wanted to try to make this a very easy kind of step-by-step process, and putting it out on paper on a Google Doc seemed to really help to give examples and so forth. So please use those for the purpose that they were intended, and I hope that they will be helpful in your future discussions. Any questions? Hearing none. David?
All right. Thank you, Angie. Boy, a lot of information in a short period of time. Are there any questions in the chat window we need to attend to?
Hi, David. It's Ron. One got up there, and I typed in a response, but I can just kind of quickly tackle that one. Samantha asked, it was kind of a follow-up to our extended year services discussion. Her question was, for a student, this would be for a student that has intellectual disabilities that would normally be served by a Strategist 2 ID teacher, or a student involved in alternate assessment. I think the question was, would the person doing extended year services also need to have that endorsement? My answer was normally that would be the appropriately licensed teacher to deliver those services. That said, there's no requirement that summer services be the same frequency or the same model as what is delivered during the school year. So I think there are sometimes cases where maybe, for example, the Strat 2 teacher could design instruction and possibly another teacher could provide extended year services. So I think sometimes we would have those scenarios. Samantha, did I answer that the right way, or did I answer what you were?
Well, yeah, that part of it, yes. And I'm assuming, would the same thing be true for a student who's going to stay beyond their 4 years of high school, so it's going to stay for their 18 to 21 period of time, still would be required to have a Strat 2 ID teacher providing
are we talking about
that instruction?
Are we talking about for summer services? Are we talking about you mean just in general or for the summer?
Sorry, you had yours on and I didn't. Sorry, can you repeat that?
So were you asking in general or for the summer services specifically?
Why is my volume on? My volume's not working. Can you turn yours back on? Yeah. I don't know what I did. Nope.
I think she was meaning through as a student ages and turns 21, so they may go to high school for 5 or 6 years. So,
yes.
so beyond when they would normally have graduated.
Yeah.
Would they need a Strat 2 licensed teacher?
Yeah, well, yeah, for sure. Just in general, I mean, that would be the, if a student has intellectual disabilities, I mean, that would be the appropriate licensure for the teacher. That wouldn't change even though the student's gone beyond 18. But that, for the extended year, the summer services, I mean, my thought is that sometimes that can be flexible, but if it's not the person with the right license delivering Usually it would be that person designing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay, thank you, Ron.
yeah.
All right, thank you, Ron. Was that it? Did we get it? Okay. Well, to wrap things up for the day, if you are, well, first of all, I guess, were there any other questions? We checked the chat window. Anything else from the field? Okay, hearing nothing. If you do have questions, feel free to email them to any member of the administrative team here, and we'll make sure we get your questions answered, and we'll get them answered for everybody. The other thing that I would ask as we close out for today is please take a moment and give us feedback on today's meeting. At the bottom of the agenda, there is a link there where you can give us some feedback. It's a very brief survey, but your feedback is hugely important to us. We want to make sure that these meetings are about the topics you need and that they are timely. So take a few minutes, fill that survey out, and we sure will appreciate it. I want to thank everybody again for being on today. I appreciate it. Like I said before, you have so many other things you could spend your time doing. However, you chose to be with us today, and I really appreciate that. And thank you to Thomas and to Julie for their work today with our AEA. We appreciate it. And with that all said, I hope everybody has a good afternoon and a safe ride home. Take care. Hi, Brooke. Who do you have with you?
I have Jocelyn.
Hi, Jocelyn. How are you?
You say hi.
See you guys later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All gone. We're done.